They were desperately in need of a cartoonist. Hi, all. My name is Kevin Paul Shaw Broden, and welcome to the Hi All podcast. I'm an author of novels and short stories, scriptwriter for animation and comic books, and I'm an illustrator of comics and other books. And I am also a voice actor. My life may not have many interesting moments, at least to those outside my family, but I hope you enjoy my tales. And now, on to the episode.
Episode 6 Reading, a Window in Education.
Hi, all. A dozen or more of us were standing in a line on a football field, and it wasn't even the field of our high school. Tomorrow would be graduation day, and today is rehearsal. Before we could get into the rehearsal line, some of us had to get into the smaller line that slowly moved and approached a corkboard standing off to the side of the field with several pages pinned upon it. Each of us came up to it, searching for our name. The girl in front of me and myself were desperate to find where our names appeared on the board, because only then would we find out if we were graduating high school or not. As I've told you, I've struggled through school, all my classes affected by my struggle and difficulty to read. Each year was better, much better, but it was still hard. When an assignment called for me to read chapter 6, 7, and 8 of some science book or some literature tome, the more pages I had to get through, the harder it got. There were classes I wanted to enjoy, but even those were hard. And yet, the girl was happy to see her name was on the graduating list, and she ran towards the rehearsal line. I stepped forward, up to the board, and began searching for my name. There was a lot of names on the graduating list. Where was my name on that list? You'd think it would be alphabetical. Where is it? Where is my name? Either on the graduation list or on the list of people that would be redoing our senior year in high school. Ah, there it was. And I was going to graduate. Just barely, but I was. Praise God. Tomorrow I would be graduating, and next year I would be starting at our local community college. Other than my comic books, I wanted to have nothing to do with books throughout all of the summer. It would be at this community college the following fall that would change everything and save me multiple times. My focus in those first couple of years were to be on what I was dreaming about since childhood, to become a comic book artist. Of course, there were those general ed classes that had to be taken as well, and there was where a lot of my struggle would continue. The most undesirable reading possible. It would take art classes during this time that got me through it all. Taking an illustration class was good, but a secondary class taught by the same teacher was even better. Cartooning. Not only did we learn how to draw caricatures and cartoon strips, but we also studied the newspaper comics from long ago, from the time periods from before my comic book superheroes ever came into existence. The study of that art meant a lot to me. On top of that, as we worked on our assignments in class, the teacher brought back an old friend of mine. old-time radio of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s that I had already fallen in love with long ago. The comedy shows, the mysteries, the adventures, all told in the theater of sound and imagination, played as we drew our art and cartoons. Classes like this would certainly keep me on the path that I had set for myself so many years before, and it made me so happy. While taking more art classes, I also took writing courses to improve my storytelling abilities. At the start of one semester, I was taking a class on how to sell my writing. The first thing we all had to do was to introduce ourselves and describe what our goals were for the class. I told them my desire to be an artist, to work in comics. Suddenly, the teacher got excited and dragged me down the hall to where she was the faculty advisor for the school newspaper. They were desperately in need of a cartoonist. Becoming part of that school newspaper lifted me up so high. Not only was I regularly doing cartoons and illustrations, but I also began to write for it. I wrote for every page: editorial, news, entertainment, and feature. The only page I didn't write for was sports. I was never good at sporting the sport anyway. I stayed on that community college newspaper even after I graduated and moved on to the local university. It would save my grade point average while I struggled with all new classes. I struggled even further in many of the classes at the university while I couldn't find the right classes I needed for my goals. I finally arranged to have an appointment with a school counselor in the art department. The simple question I had for him was, what classes should I take to work in comic books? The answer I received was, well, take my illustration class. That was it. I would have done that on my own without his suggestion if I thought it would help. His counseling wasn't helpful at all. In my heart, I knew what was going to happen next. With my grades really bad, I was going to drop out of school. I knew I couldn't keep going, and the school wasn't being helpful to me at all. It hurt a lot. I left the counselor's office with these terrible thoughts in my mind and walked down a dark hallway between classrooms that hadn't done anything for me. I'd like to think I was praying to God for guidance at that time, but my heart wasn't in it. Even so, God had already made a path for me. Halfway down that dark hallway, there was a class going on, and outside that open door was a display window with examples of the art the students in that class were working on. In that window were pinned up black and white ink drawings of figures, and next to them were 3 or 4 comic book pages. Comic book pages? Comics. The very thing that I wanted to be doing. The one thing I wanted to learn to draw while at this university. The one thing that counselor couldn't tell me how to do. How did he not know that there was a class in that very building his office was teaching comic book artwork? I was suddenly lifted up out of the darkness. Things were not so lost. I met with the teacher, and he knew at once what I was after and what I would be needing. However, because he was taking a sabbatical, I would have to wait another semester before I could start his classes. So he recommended ones to take while I waited. As I took those classes, I went back to the newspaper to keep my grades up and do more illustrations and cartooning and writing. This art teacher was everything I needed. Not only did he have figure drawing courses, but also a class that focused on the head and hands. These classes included painting, focusing on the figure and how to paint portraits. I would get so much out of these classes. The special studies course, which I had seen those comic book pages pinned in the display window, was so much more. Not only were there comics, but training in storyboards for movies and animation, background matte paintings for movies, and so much more. I renamed the class Narrative Illustration, but even that didn't hold to all that it was. There were still classes I was struggling with, but with the newspaper and this special studies art class, I was able to pull myself out of the worst of it and found more opportunities to enjoy reading. Even in that school, I found that there was an actual science fiction as literature class. Though at my reading rate, I wouldn't be able to complete all the required books in one semester, but it was still great. Graduating from university was so much greater than it was from high school. Now I could turn towards the world and discover what God was preparing me for. Thank you all. Bye bye. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my tales. I look forward to sharing the next one with you. Visit my website and socials here. Please like, subscribe, and comment below. Thank you again. Bye, all.